Hello everybody, this is Starlight Studios and I'm beginning another new series. So I decided that the other day I was talking about proportions and anatomy and so on and so forth. I'll start out with beginning that I went to art school for 4 years and I've continued to independent study for the last 20 years. Looking at art books, looking at anatomy books, looking at Google, Instagram, whatever. Looking at other people's works, studying other people's works. So I have a great deal of knowledge, and I just wanted to share it with other people. Um, so the demonstration here is rather complicated, but I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible. There was an inquiry about how to proportion the lower part of the body, and this is actually very complicated. But here's a start. So I'm gonna start with a male figure to begin, and then a female figure is gonna be a completely different setup. But yeah. Anyway, and then there's other dimensions for adolescents, children, etc. So there's quite a lot of detail that can go into this, and as a matter of fact, I can probably make a whole series about just this concept. So saying that this is complicated is probably an understatement. There's a lot of detail, a lot of information, a lot of years of study and practice that goes into this. But again, I'm going to try to simplify it as much as possible. So we're going to be starting with an adult male. At first, I like to start with basic shape, and what we do is this is the excuse me, I'm trying to sit in a better way. Anyway, let me try to blah that up a little bit. All right. So try to start with a simple shape, and then you translate that shape into another shape. So this represents the head, for example. And I'm going to translate that into another shape, which is this line here, which is relative to the same diameter as that circle. Now, this is a lot of general rules. The first most important thing that you always want to keep in mind is that these are all general guidelines. In order to get into specific guidelines, you want to use a reference. There's always that argument that everybody looks different, that there's different body types, etc., etc., etc. But within those body types, you will find these similar patterns. It does not matter what kind of body type you have. As a matter of fact, the following demonstration will most likely not change anything at all unless there's an extreme difference of body type. But that's another demonstration altogether. We're talking about the general here. As a general concept, the average person is approximately 7 or 7.5 heads tall. That's kind of a hard thing to explain if you've never heard of it before. But like I said, so this is one measurement here. So you do that again, and you just kind of eyeball it. So right here, that's 2. Right here, that's 3. And it's it might be a good, this might be a good time for you just to practice your measuring. So when it comes to proportion, measuring is actually extremely important. It's not so important that you want to get fixated on it or get hyper focused on it, but you do want to keep it in mind, and you want to keep it as even as possible if you would like. If you would like to be a little bit more thorough, you can take a set distance, like a pencil, and then measure each space, or you could take a ruler. You could take your finger, for example, measure it that way. And there's many other there's many other methods in order to measure your distances. But what this does is it helps to put the body into the correct structure, and then you can make minor modifications as you look at your subject matter or the model. Excuse me again, I can't seem to sit in a comfortable way. Anyway, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and approximately a half. Alright, so this might look extremely long to you, but I promise you that this is right. So first of all, you have 1, and then I'm gonna just double check my shapes real quick. 1, 2, 3, maybe just a little bit further on that one. 4, maybe just a little further than that one. Maybe a higher up on that one. Definitely higher up on that one. And then that looks about right. Okay, and of course I'm going to be making adjustments as I go. This is just the basic structure. Now, what some people will do at this point is actually draw the 7 heads. I think that's kind of like you can skip this step if you would like to do it because it helps you. Then this is something that some artists will do. I don't necessarily use it, but that is a tool that you can use. You can just draw the rest of the circles and try to keep your circles as even as possible. A very good practice for this is just to draw an entire page of circles, and this practice drawing your page of circles. You definitely want to practice your shapes over and over and over again until you get the hang of drawing those shapes. Now these aren't perfect circles by any stretch of the imagination, but you get the idea and the impression of a circle, and that's pretty much what you're going for. Especially because the body isn't really made of circles anyway, they're made more of ovals, and of course they're actually more spherical than circles, but that's another conversation. Alright, so now again, to remind people of what we're doing here, we are drawing a male. And there's really no difference between a male and a female when it comes to this particular proportion. 7.5 is estimated to be approximately correct. A male might be 7 to 8 heads, and the female might be 6.5 to 7.5 heads. So there might be some slight fluctuation there, but it's not going to be drastic. Just know that the proportions themselves are going to change, not the measurement. So the 7.5 heads high is always going to stay the same, but the proportions of the circles of the space in between is going to change. Now, this is a estimation. I always find it seems to change slightly, but for a male, the chest is approximately 1.5 heads tall. So what I mean by that is take a half measurement here, or slightly above half, and that's where the chest should be, or relatively. And again, I'm not using any kind of reference, I'm just using general proportions, general guidelines. It's important to use your reference when you're looking at proportions, and just know that this is not necessarily meant to be something that, like, okay, use this always all the time. This is just general understanding of what the body should be looking like. And if you ever draw a figure study or anatomy study or anything like that, you want to check these proportions to see how close they are, and again, use your reference over these proportions. But these proportions are here to assist you and understanding the length of the anatomy. The particular question in mind was talking about the lower body, and I've noticed over and over and over again that people don't necessarily do that correctly. The legs are extremely long. As a matter of fact, they're half your body, or maybe even a little bit more than half your body. So the legs are very long, and even more so probably on a male than a female, and I'll get into that another day. Excuse me. Alright, so I'm going to draw a couple details just because it helps me. So here's the neck. Here are the trapezoids. You don't necessarily need to get into this part right now. I'm just talking about the structure, so the actual shapes of the body aren't as important here. I'm just doing this so I know where things are. So right here is not necessarily important. So just keep it in mind. So the torso. So this is where the chest is, but here's where the torso is. And that's going to be about 2.5 heads long, roughly. And again, a lot of these things are rough estimates. Keep in mind that this is not a gesture drawing, this is a structural or constructual drawing. So there's a difference between a gesture drawing and a constructural drawing. I was talking about that to somebody else another day, but this shapes here, this is constructural. A gesture drawing is meant to be fluid, lines, easy flow. I'm not going to get too much into that at the moment, but right here is a proportional or structural drawing. Now, I've mentioned this before in a previous video, but the shoulders, especially for a male, are approximately 1 femur long, and I'm going to get into that later. It seems to me that these shoulders are long enough to me, and I'll check my proportions later. Once you have done something long enough, you just kind of start to notice when things look right, or when things don't look right, and you just kind of learn how to eyeball it. I'm not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know my proportions pretty well. As a matter of fact, I messed up on that chest a little bit, so you can see that I actually raised it a little bit. And then those are those adjustments that I was talking about before. So this torso here is looking pretty correct. Men's waist tend to be pretty trim. But be careful not to make it too trim. For in general, guys are wider than females. Now this is where the legs are gonna start. Just look how long those legs are. They're pretty long. Now, by estimation, halfway point is, so here's where the belly is. The halfway point is right about here above the abdomen. So here is the groin area, or the crotch, if you will. I'm not really sure what the appropriate term there is, so I'm just going to use both of them. But that, I've heard both. In anatomy books, they usually refer it to as the crotch, but the groin, well, technically the groin is here. This is the muscle here, the groin muscle here, but anyway, I'm not trying to get into too many technicals. Just know that the anatomy and the name of the anatomy is fairly important, so you want to try to use the correct terms. Anyway, so the halfway or midway point of the body is approximately halfway above the groin or the crotch area. And this is estimation, so that's this distance here, this distance here, and this distance here, and take that distance, and take that distance. So it seems to be just a little bit off, so I'm going to fix that. And I'm going to check that again, this distance here, this distance here, maybe a little bit higher. There. And all of these measurements are approximate, and I've already mentioned that. Now here's a very important measurement, and I've already stated this before, but the shoulders. or approximately proportional. This distance here, this distance here, to the leg. That looks too long. I'm going to measure that again. Right there, I think. I think that looks right. It still looks a little off. So maybe I drew these shoulders a little bit too long. I'll make a small adjustment. And that will raise that knee just a little bit more. There. Not much. There, that looks about right. The knee is approximately halfway midpoint of the leg, but keep in mind that the bottom leg is a little bit shorter and the rest of the space is for the foot. Keep in mind that all of your shapes are going to be circles. Your knee here, your knee here, your leg here, your leg here, your leg here, your leg here, and then your foot here. Now I'm going to be a little lazy about this and I'm just going to draw some shoes. I don't necessarily feel like drawing feet right now. So I'm just going to draw some shoes. There. And I think I need to make some slight modifications here. But I think this looks pretty close. One thing I've noticed a lot is people don't make men curvy enough, but men can be pretty curvy, especially in their hips. There's definitely a lot of straight lines. I heard somebody talk about this the other day, but they're not straight. They're curvy straight. They are very square, but again, they're curvy square. There really is no straight lines on a person, and just be careful about that. So here you go. The shoulder is approximately proportional to the femur here. So you just want to check that. And the arm, it comes down to about midway that femur. So this is where the hand is. This is where the wrist is. This is where the forearm is. And this is where the bicep is. This is the shoulder. And the other side simply mirrors that side. These proportions can be a little bit more difficult when they're changing the position of the arms, but if you understand what the length of the arm is, what the length of each segment of the arm is supposed to be, the forearm, the bicep, and the hands, then everything becomes a little bit better. Now I'm going to go ahead and draw that sternum. I'm going to draw the pectoralis. I'm going to draw the clavicle. And that shoulder is a little bit off. So now we're going to get into a little bit more finer detail. I'm not going to get too much into that. The shoulder is a little bit more narrow than the bicep. The bicep pops out from the shoulder. And of course, the guy I'm drawing now is a muscular model, but yeah. And I'm not using any reference here. This is just all from memory. The abdominals. The head is at noble, excuse me. And there we go. So that is the approximate proportions of a man and how to draw the lower part of the body. So it's it's basically 1/2 of your entire body. So make sure that you make those legs long enough. The knee is approximately halfway of the leg. The foot breaks into halfway of the lower part of the leg. So the lower part of the leg is shorter than the upper part of the leg. And the knee is more or less a part of the lower leg. The feet, again, like I said, they break into it, so that's why it's 7.5. So that 7 heads here is approximately here, and half is that foot. The arms do more or less the same thing, and they're a little bit shorter. As an extra note, the arms, including the chest, are the entire length of the entire body. So if I were to draw his arms outward, then this distance here would be the same. So if I took this, that's hard to do. Excuse me. So I'm gonna use the edge of the paper. It would be approximately here if my visual memory is correct. And then of course I would shift his entire frame in the center of the paper approximately here. So this shifts him over and then draw that wingspan. So if I were to draw the wingspan now, his arm would come off of the page, and his arm, as it would raise it, I'm going to draw a semicircle. That's not right. Hold on. Oh, that's right. So, never mind. Let me just test this real quick. Does that look right? 1, 2. Yeah. Now, in order to do this correctly, you have to understand where the arm is coming from. It's coming from the shoulder. And it has certain limitations of movement, so moving past here becomes kind of difficult. So it's more like a half circle. Something like that. So that's the movement of the arm. And then the arm can move on past here, but the elbow has to bend, so it looks something like this. So it's not a perfect circle, it's more like an oval. So that's the arm movement approximately. And then the arm movement of the other shoulder is going to be similar, and they're going to overlap like a Venn diagram. Now this distance here, does that look right? I think that looks right. This is a halfway. Right there. Wait. Right there. Wait. That's hard. Oh, the pencil works. Okay. Yeah, so as you can see, the pencil is clearly off of the page. And the halfway point is right there. So there we go. Halfway. So I did that maybe a little bit too long. Something more like that. There. Anyway, so there's a couple proportions and there's some couple structures and a little bit of anatomy. I can definitely go into further detail, but this is all I pretty much planned for now. This is going to be one of a series, and I'm going to be doing more of these, so I'm just going to stop for a minute, and if you guys would like me to review anything, I'll gladly do so, or go into further detail about just that one section, like just the legs, for example, just the torso, for example, or any other part of the body. It's much easier for me to draw the entire thing, so I apologize about that. we want to talk about just the legs, just know that knowing the entire length of the body is pretty important. So, if you don't want to draw the entire thing like I just did, you should at least know what the length of the body is, and just do like a cheat sheet, like 1, 2, 3, 4 and a half, and then from there draw the legs, and then don't draw the rest. That's one good way of doing that. And I decided for this particular drawing that I was going to scale down my drawing because it's much easier for me to draw a smaller scale. I didn't feel like drawing an upscale drawing and talking about anatomy at the same time. I feel like that was a little bit too challenging for me. I definitely would like to get to that point, but as you can see, this drawing is much more proportional, much more correct than my larger drawing. So the scaling is a next level ability, and I've just never quite gotten there. Like I've talked about before, but I'm not going to get too much into this because I already have another video about it. But maybe you want to use that grid technique, or maybe you want to do these, what I just did, which I actually failed to do with my last drawing. And I did fail to map out the drawing beforehand, so that's one of the benefits of doing that. It all depends on your ability to measure things with your eyes or remember things to the way something looks by eyeballing it. Other people have different skill sets, and other people have different ability levels. I happen to always pretty much need these reminders, which is why I offer people a critique, because if I notice something looks slightly off, then I'm going to want to try to help them improve. I am very familiar with the proportions and the structures and the construction of the body because I need it in order to make my drawing better. Not everybody needs it, but some people do. Some people can just draw something without really looking at it. I mean, I suppose I was able to draw this without looking at it, but I have years and years of practice, and I'm sure that there's something here that's incorrect. I'm almost positive about it, but without looking at a reference, I'm not going to be able to tell. But as far as a general concept, as far as a quote-unquote mannequin, as far as a art model like one of those figurines go, this is what you would like to look at. I have never used one, but I recommend using a doll, an art doll. There's also apps that you can use, and just looking up how to draw books. That's what I've done for 20 years. So I'm still teaching myself how to draw, even though I already know how. So there we go, and it's just nice to give you a reminder of these techniques and these things over and over and over again, because this improves your work. This is one of the things that we really concentrated on in art school. It's not like anybody necessarily taught us how to draw. It's just more like, hey, here's a whole bunch of rules, and good luck. It wasn't like, okay, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this. Make sure that they're in this particular pose. It's not. I've seen some of these like anime and cartoon places, and they draw exactly what they see over and over and over and over again, and they're literally taught how to draw, not just what like drawing looks like. So like our education was a little bit more freehand and a little bit more expressive. My work tends to be a little bit more expressive as well, mainly because I don't think I have the ability to do a perfect drawing like that. Even if I did, I don't know if I would want to. So there's a lot that goes into play when you're talking about art. You have to be careful about that. But when you're talking about something specific, then you can be a lot more critical. So if you're talking about anatomy, then you should be a lot more critical, because the anatomy should be as close as perfect as possible. If you're talking about the structure of the body, then you want to be as close as possible. If you want to talk about the construction of the body, then you want to be as close as possible. So, but if you're talking about just drawing a character, or drawing a person, or drawing drawing a base, drawing anything like that, then if you're doing it as a tutorial, if you're doing it as instructional, if you're doing it as, hey, I'm going to learn how to draw the form of the body, then you want to stick to the quote-unquote correct way to do so. If you want to then talk about one step further beyond, is okay, not only do I want to draw the body, but I want to draw it in a creative way, or use my style, or draw a more dynamic pose, or draw a more stylistic pose. But you want to start with the basics. These are the basics before you do that. Understanding the rules before you break them. Again, I probably said this before, but in no way is this probably perfect. It's probably not even close. But I do know that these proportions will help serve you well. And if you use these constructions and use these measurements, these tools, 7 heads high, the arm is 1/2 of the body if you include the chest, stuff like that. If you keep these notations in mind, it will improve your work. So I think that's all for today. I'm going to continue this series, probably with females next. So stay tuned for that. This is Starlight Studios, signing out. Thanks, guys.